I manage a few properties in a few more distressed neighborhoods, and properties in a distressed neighborhood will of course rent for a considerably lower number. The problem with that is the lower the rent, often the applicants are not as desirable, and you end up just having to choose the best applicant you can find. Often it's not a really desirable, great credit score, and you just might have no option. The other problem, even worse, is the lower the rent, the lower the security deposit. So most municipalities will have a restriction to how much security deposit you can charge. Here in Philadelphia, we're only allowed to charge 1 month's rent security deposit. There are certain ways around that, strategies that you can employ, but that would be a topic for a different podcast episode. So the tenants typically will move out, and being of sometimes a lower quality tenant, the properties will often be more damaged than you would see otherwise in a better quality neighborhood and for more rent. And of course, we don't have the security deposit to right the property. So you often run into the issue where the damage exceeds the amount that you collected as a deposit. And that's not always a concern. So typically we're seeing when tenants are moving out to fix the properties up, to repair walls, and to do a deep cleaning. Typically we have to take things to a dump. We're really seeing, that the owners are out of pocketing, in the last case it was $580 is what the tenant was shy. We still go after the tenant. We put it in the lease that we have a right to report them to a credit bureau, and we do. We have a right to put them in collections, and we do. So the goal is to eventually recover this, 580 additional damages above the security deposit that the tenant paid to us. But if we don't get that money, and it's a little bit difficult to get that money because security deposit, you physically have it. It's in your hands. It's the tenant's money, but you're the one who has it. Possession is 9/10 of the law. You can prove that the tenant has caused certain damages. You get to keep that money. The problem with the extra $580 is we don't physically have that. We would have to get that from the tenant. We can threaten the tenant all we like, and it's going to end up being if they pay or if they don't. And eventually they probably will. But, the out-of-pocket $580 amount isn't devastating. It's obviously a loss, and it's upsetting to an owner to get an unexpected bill for $580, especially when it's not fair. It's not like something in the property broke. It's not like a refrigerator stopped working and you had to go out and fix it. It's because the tenant was so disrespectful to their property. However, it's an investment, and we're talking about numbers. So when we're actually looking at our numbers, if the rent amount is coming in and it can cover all aspects of the debt, plus make you a profit in the way of cash flow, including potential tenant damage. So when I invest in a bad neighborhood, I want to know, do I have the money to pay any debt that I might put on the property, such as a mortgage payment? I want to, of course, be able to pay my property tax. I want to pay capital expenses. Capital expenses are those things that we know will mechanically fail. We know you're going to have to replace a roof in 20 years. We know you're going to have to replace your HVAC system in 20 years. Your hot water heater will last for 8 years. Things of this nature. On top of that, I will actually put a kind of a tenant nonsense, amount in there. Just to say, okay, well, when the tenant moves out, how much out of pocket am I likely going to have to go because the security deposit is going to be so low and the quality of the tenant is going to be so low that I have to expect some kind of damage to that. And if those numbers make sense, they make sense. And they typically often might, because in the way real estate works, this is generalization, but the higher value properties tend to rent at a lower percentage than lower value properties do. And they also take longer to rent. So if you have $1 million property, you can expect it to stay vacant for much longer, and you can expect the percentage of the tenant rent is going to be much lower than if you own 4 properties, each worth $250,000. So a $80,000 property is always going to rent for $500, $800, it's pretty much wherever you go. So that's a very high percentage for an $80,000 property, obviously. So typically the rents will be up and more than you could typically get in a nicer neighborhood, and you've been collecting the extra rent, and in theory, that extra rent can be so much that it can more than cover the tenant damage, when the tenant moves out. All right, I'm Joe White, Philadelphia property management company owner, doing my best to answer your rental property investment questions, also trying to get in there swap as usual. Happy rental property investing.